Millennials grew up being told they could be anything. Gen Z grew up with the entire internet in their pocket. And Gen X? Gen X grew up being told dinner was in the fridge and to be home before dark. No GPS, no group chats, no algorithm deciding what they watched next. If they got lost, they stayed lost until they figured it out. If they were bored, they stayed bored until they invented something to do. And somehow, that generation ended up being the one researchers keep pointing to when they want to understand what psychological resilience actually looks like in practice. So, what did growing up in the analog world give them that nothing since has been able to replicate? Let's go back to the 1970s and early 1980s, because you need to understand what the world actually looked like when Gen X was growing up. There were no smartphones, obviously, but it goes way deeper than that. If you wanted to talk to a friend, you called their house and hoped someone picked up. If nobody picked up, you just didn't talk to them. You waited. If you needed directions somewhere, you either had a paper map, asked a stranger, or got lost. Getting lost was a real possibility. If you were bored, there was no algorithm waiting to feed you something entertaining. You had to go outside and find something to do, or sit there and be bored. Boredom was just a thing that happened to you sometimes. And the parents of Generation X? A lot of them were going through the cultural chaos of the post-Vietnam era, navigating skyrocketing divorce rates, economic uncertainty, and a complete reshuffling of what American family life even looked like. Which meant a whole lot of Generation X kids were left to their own devices, sometimes literally for hours at a time. Psychologists now have a term for this. They call it free-range childhood, and there is growing research suggesting it was one of the most developmentally rich environments a child could grow up in. Not because it was comfortable, but because it was not. Here is where it gets interesting. Child psychologist Peter Gray spent years studying the link between unstructured play and emotional development. What he found was that children who regularly navigated boredom, conflict with other kids, and real risk without adult intervention developed something that children in highly supervised environments often did not: a tolerance for uncertainty. Generation X experienced uncertainty in enormous quantities. Think about what it meant to plan something in 1983. You called your friend, agreed to meet at the park at 2 p.m., and then you both just had to show up. There were no group chats to confirm. There were no "I am on my way" texts. There was no location sharing. You made a plan and you honored it, or the whole thing fell apart, and you had no way to fix it. You had to be reliable, because there was no backup system if you were not. Or think about what happened when something broke. A record skipped. The antenna on the TV was bent. The bike chain came off. You didn't Google the fix. You didn't watch a YouTube tutorial. You either figured it out yourself, found someone who knew, or you did without it. That was the whole menu of options. What this created, over thousands of repetitions throughout childhood, was a brain that got genuinely good at tolerating problems without panicking. Good at sitting with the discomfort of not knowing the answer immediately. Good at improvising. Now compare that to what came after, and this isn't a generational attack, it's just what the data shows. Millennials grew up as the first true helicopter parenting generation. Every problem got solved. Every activity got structured. Conflict between kids got adult intervention. And then the internet arrived right as they were hitting adolescence, which meant the shift from analog uncertainty to instant digital answers happened at the exact moment their problem-solving habits were forming. Gen Z went even further into the digital world. Many of them never really experienced a moment of being unreachable, of being bored with no solution available, of having to navigate something without being able to look it up first. None of this makes those generations less capable or less intelligent, but it does mean they built resilience differently, or in some cases, did not build the specific analog flavor of it at all. The psychiatrist Jean Twenge has been tracking generational mental health data for decades. She has found that anxiety and depression rates started rising sharply right around the time smartphones became ubiquitous, particularly among younger generations. One pattern she keeps returning to is the loss of unsupervised time, the exact thing Gen X had in abundance. But here's what's really worth paying attention to, and this is the part that surprises people. Gen X's resilience isn't just about what they survived. It's about the specific cognitive skills that analog problem-solving developed in them. Skills that, weirdly, are now considered elite in corporate environments and leadership research. The first one is delayed gratification tolerance. When you grow up in a world where information takes time, where you have to wait for the next episode of a show because there's no streaming, where you mail a letter and wait 2 weeks for a reply, your brain learns to hold a desire without immediately acting on it. That's a skill. And it is one that psychologists link directly to emotional regulation, which is the ability to manage your own feelings without immediately reacting to them. The second is what researchers call cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift your approach when the first plan does not work. Gen X practiced this constantly. The record is scratched, so you find another way to have fun. The phone is busy, so you ride your bike over instead. The game you wanted to play needs 4 people, and you only have 3, so you invent a 3-person version. That constant, low-level creative problem-solving wired a kind of mental agility that shows up in how Gen X adults handle workplace disruption, relationship conflict, and unexpected crisis. The third skill is ambiguity tolerance, which is exactly what it sounds like. The ability to function without having all the information. A kid who regularly navigated a world without GPS, without instant answers, without constant adult guidance, built a high threshold for operating in the unknown. And in a world where business conditions shift constantly and no one has all the answers, that threshold matters. There is a researcher named Angela Duckworth who spent years studying what she calls grit, the combination of passion and perseverance for long-term goals. Her research found that grit was a stronger predictor of success than IQ, socioeconomic background, or talent. And when she looked at what conditions produced grit, the answer kept coming back to something close to what Gen X lived: an environment with genuine obstacles, limited outside help, and enough autonomy to fail and try again. Gen X basically lived in a grit incubator for 18 years and had no idea. Which is also why so many Gen Xers talk about their childhood with this particular mix of dark humor and zero bitterness. They know it was objectively rough in certain ways. The latchkey reality and the benign neglect sometimes tipped into actual neglect. They are not pretending any of that was perfect, but they also genuinely feel like it made them who they are. And the research increasingly backs that up. There is one more thing worth talking about, and it is the piece that gets overlooked most often. Generation X did not just develop resilience in isolation, they developed it in community, but a specific kind of community that no longer really exists. The neighborhood, the block, the group of kids from different grades who all just kind of roamed together after school. Generation X kids did not get their social skills from a screen or a structured play date. They got them from navigating the genuinely complex social dynamics of a mixed-age group of children who had to work things out themselves because no adult was watching. You learned how to negotiate with a 9-year-old who wanted to play one game when you wanted to play a different one. You learned how to deal with a kid who cheated, and whether it was worth calling them out or letting it go. You learned how to lose in front of other people without someone rushing in to regulate your emotions for you. You learned that sometimes the big kid got his way, and that wasn't fair, and life went on anyway. That is a social education. And it happened completely organically, completely without structure, and completely in the analog world. So, where does that leave us now? Gen X is the last generation that was fully formed before the digital world arrived. Every generation after them grew up with at least some version of instant information, constant connection, or digital entertainment as part of their baseline reality. That means Gen X caught the tail end of something that had existed for basically all of human history up to that point, and then the door closed. That's not nostalgia talking. Researchers who study resilience and psychological development have started calling this specific window the analogue advantage, the developmental period when the friction of the physical, disconnected world built mental muscles that the smoothed-out digital world does not require anymore. Gen X didn't choose it. They didn't know it was special. They were just kids doing what kids do. But the world they grew up in accidentally handed them a set of skills that turned out to be remarkably well suited for navigating adult life in an era of constant change, constant noise, and constant uncertainty. That accidental training helped build a kind of resilience. And honestly, given how much uncertainty the next few decades are likely to bring, the rest of us might want to start taking notes.